Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bree Kirsch, and I'll be the moderator for this session of Lightning Talks titled AI on the Spot, The World Beyond Cloud Models and Using Generative AI in LibGuides. Before we begin, we do have a few reminders. I am pasting the Code of Conduct link in the chat along with the contact information if there are any concerns. Please enter your comments or your questions into the chat, and we will answer questions time permitting at the end of all three presentations. This session is being recorded, and you can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. It is my pleasure to introduce our first Lightning Talk presenters, Lara Nicosia, Daniel Castillo, Claudia Pieczek, and Arjay Romanowski.
Thank you so much, Bree. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, great. Awesome. So I'm just like figuring out. Oh, there we go. Okay. So hi, everybody. Oh, no, too far, too far. Oh, no. Okay, here we go. I gave you a little sneak peek. Sorry about that. Okay. So hi, everybody. I'm Claudia Pieczek, and I'm here with my colleagues, Arjay, Daniel, and Lara from River Campus Libraries at the University of Rochester. Our session today is called AI on the Spot, a pop-up approach to collecting student feedback. And we're excited to show you how we used a fast, low-lift pop-up model to collect over 100 student responses about generative AI in just 2 hours. So we're a cross-disciplinary team from the University of Rochester, and I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, starting with Daniel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Castillo. I'm the Somerville Director for the Carlson Science and Engineering Libraries and Research Initiatives team here at the University of Rochester.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lara Nicosia. I am the Digital Learning Strategist and Humanities Librarian at the University of Rochester.
I'm Claudia Pieczek. I'm the User Experience and Social Media Manager for River Campus Libraries.
And I'm Arjay Romanowski. I'm a STEM Liaison Librarian at the University of Rochester.
So you may have noticed like a Western theme to our presentation, and you'll understand more as we go through it. Okay, so at RCL, we've been running some student forum events for over the last 7 years. These are informal, interactive, UX-based sessions designed to explore big questions about our spaces, services, and systems, but through a student lens. So our goal for doing this pop-up was to understand how students perceive, use, and discuss generative AI in order to shape more relevant and responsive library services. So whenever we do student forums, we don't go in expecting polished answers. We're after real facts, feelings, and behaviors. In the past, these events have helped us test new service ideas, gather feedback for renovations, and improve our website. We use a mix of UX methods like journey mapping, voting exercises, box pops, design charrettes, even quick hit interviews, all to make sure the student voices are directly shaping what we build. So our approach for this specific student forum was inspired by guerrilla UX research, quick, agile, and highly approachable. We didn't promote that much ahead of time. No flyers, no emails, just a few quick posts on our Instagram stories. I manage social media here at River Campus Library, so that was pretty easy for me to do. We set up 3 interactive stations in a high traffic part of the library during a busy part of the day. The goal was to invite spontaneous interaction. We used colorful visuals, creative prompts, and approachable language to draw students into our 3 activities. And it worked. We gathered more than 100 responses in 2 hours across a wide range of majors and tech familiarity levels. This method is perfect if you need rapid feedback, especially on emerging topics like AI, where student perspectives are still forming.
In the AI Budget Challenge, we aim to identify student willingness to spend towards AI tools and identify usage trends. We gave students $100 of Monopoly money and encouraged them to walk up and spend that money towards AI tool subscriptions. Our tools included OpenAI's ChatGPT, DeepSeek, Google Gemini, Copilot, and others. Originally, we didn't actually include a none category because we wanted to restrict the challenge to actual AI users. Next slide. We split the lessons learned here into the good, the bad, and the ugly. The best part of this activity was a willingness for the students to discuss the tools and what they use them for. Students also universally insisted on the right to include a none category, emphasizing their desire for free and open tools. It was very obvious during discussions that while a lot of our students were actively using AI, they didn't want to have to pay to do so. However, the activity did have some challenges. Clear, concise instructions are integral to the success of this challenge. Too ambiguous and they get confused, too involved and they didn't want to engage. For instance, one of our signs included the word invest, and quite a few students thought they were literally investing their money into the companies. This led to a funny interaction where a student asked me, why should I invest in OpenAI when I can invest in NVIDIA instead? Finally, we want to include a lot of tools, but some of these are ambiguous. Very few students knew what Midjourney or Runway ML were, and our computer science students thought we meant GitHub's Copilot instead of Microsoft Bing. This was pretty easily fixed in conversation with the students, but it can slow down the flow of the interaction.
The My AA Journey was a Mad Lib-style worksheet that allowed students to offer open-ended responses. We asked a range of questions to learn what AI resources they used, what they use AI for, and their general impressions of AI. While some students were extremely positive about AI, other students voiced concern around its use. Here's a quick highlight of some of their answers. Next slide, please. For the good, this exercise allowed us to get better insights into how students felt about AI by asking questions that did not rely on a limited set of answers. And I was really surprised that we were able to get nearly 50 responses, given that we had almost 20 questions on each worksheet. For the bad, these were all handwritten responses, and some of the handwriting can be tough to read. Also, due to the silly nature of the exercises, some of the answers are a little bit more ambiguous than you might get with a traditional survey. And with 19 data points covering preferences and sentiment over AI, the analysis required for this exercise compared with the other two gives us the ugly. Next slide, please.
Our last of the three activities was something designed to help gauge students' use of AI tools and decide which tools they use most frequently, either in their academic or their personal lives. So for this activity, students were asked to place a sparkly gold ball into a jar labeled with a Gen AI platform to represent the one that they rely on the most for either their studies or personal use. During the activity, some of the students asked if they could put multiple balls in multiple jars to reflect frequent use of several tools, and we allowed that. And we also had jars labeled for other and none. And on the slide, you could see a list of the different tools that we had pre-selected for the jar titles. Next slide, Claudia. So what worked well with this activity? This one was the most popular of the activities because it was so quick and simple for students to participate in. It was something that I could easily stand there and say to students walking by, just give me 30 seconds. You just have to put a ball in a jar. It was a really quick, easy thing to do, but it also was very visually clear which platform students most preferred. It also led to some spontaneous peer-to-peer conversations where students would be with their friends and their friends would put a ball in one jar and they would say, I didn't know you used that, or what does that tool do? So that was interesting to see. The bad is that it was limited to a predefined list of tools. And when students chose other, I needed to try to intercept them to find out what tool they might be using instead in order to get some more information. And it didn't actually capture how the students were using the tools. It just told us which tools they were using, not if they were using them for academic or personal or how in those contexts it was being used. For ugly, or I in my head thought of this as the most interesting things about it, was that some students expressed skepticism or concern about using AI tools at all. But the event occurred shortly after DeepSeek's launch, and so it was interesting to see how well DeepSeek did, given that it had only been really known to most students for a couple of weeks. It was interesting to see that they were already using it. And we have an internal Gen AI tool, UR AI, which had also recently launched. It was interesting to see how many students didn't know that it existed, but it was a good opportunity to let them know that this was an option for them.
Here are our charts. In activity 1, we can see that almost half of all the money deposited in boxes was none. A clear sign our students didn't want to spend their money. ChatGPT was the most worth our students' cash, but DeepSeek did sneak in. As Lara has just mentioned, It had just been released and was getting a lot of attention in the public sphere. Next slide. Overall, as Daniel mentioned, most of the students had an overall positive sentiment towards AI. The negative students, on the other hand, were vehemently anti-AI. They were using harsh words like hate and painful, and they expressed their desire to destroy technology. Next slide. Lara's activity definitely showed similar numbers seen in Activity 1. ChatGPT was the most used AI, with DeepSeek edging out all the other tools thanks to the recent release.
So if you want to try something like this at your own library, you absolutely can. Keep your setup simple, colorful prompts, short activities, no tech needed, use real student language, and pick a spot in your library with steady foot traffic. Make sure that it's a judgment-free zone and a little bit playful. That's what makes people want to stop and participate. Feel free to have a speaker with music playing and, of course, free food. We had insomnia cookies at our event, and our students love that. This approach was flexible enough to adapt to other topics too, not just AI, and it's a great way to keep your finger on the pulse without over-surveying your community.
This forum allowed us to talk directly with students to learn more about how they were using AI and felt about it. This information is helpful as we prepare for future programming and research and learning support. Name brand recognition seemed to play a large role in student preferences. It was clear that most students favored ChatGPT over other models. Not surprisingly, the second most was Google Gemini, followed by DeepSeek, which was noted that it was prominent in the news that week. I was a little surprised to see how few students were using the university's custom LLM. The university rolled it out mid-semester, so it is possible that students had already found their favorite options at that point. Students also seem to hone in on general purpose models such as ChatGPT versus specialized ones like Grammarly or Midjourney. Students also held widely varying sentiments around AI. While the overall sentiment skewed positive, students also expressed serious fears about AI. To finish this off, I just want to take a moment to thank my fellow presenters. This was a great word to learn more about students and how they felt about AI, and with the right group of collaborators, it can be a lot of fun too.
All right, thank you, group. And please remove your slides so our next group can share theirs. It is now my pleasure to introduce our next Lightning Talk presenters, John Fink and Tim Riberick.
Right now. So can you come back in a little bit? Sorry, I'm very, very sorry.
So John is just situating himself. While he does that, I'll just say hello.
Sorry.
Welcome, everyone. There we go. Off to you, John. Let you go.
As I was, can people hear me?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
Sorry, my microphone thing isn't bouncing up now. Sorry, as I was ready to present, someone knocked on my office door. I'm like, get out of my office. Anyway, sorry. I'm John Fink. I'm digital scholarship librarian at McMaster University with my wonderful colleague, Tim Riberick. Before I get started, I do have to apologize for the artlessness of my slides. I have no art in my soul whatsoever, and so I write my slides in LaTeX, which is a programming language from 1978 that philosophers and mathematicians like. Anyway, so the world beyond cloud models. Could you advance the slide, please? What is a cloud model? When we're talking about cloud models, we're generally talking about models like ChatGPT, like Claude, like Copilot, models that don't exist in your local machine but are accessed over the web, generally speaking. These models tend to be very large and very obvious and very prominent, and everyone knows what they are, but I kind of want to get that definition out right away. Okay, next slide. So this is a picture of an Azure data center at Microsoft. It is probably not the literal data center that ChatGPT runs on, but it's probably very similar. Just tons and tons and tons of machines, tons and tons of electricity, and I guess one single person walking around. There we go. Next slide, please. So what's wrong with cloud models? Well, first off, a rather big one, and it became even bigger in the last week or so, is privacy. So I say in the last week or so because there's an ongoing court case with the New York Times, I think, and OpenAI that's been going on for 17, 18 months. And as part of those court deliberations, OpenAI/ChatGPT has to keep every single transcript, even if they've been labeled, ephemeral or temporary, every single transcript from at least its web interface and perhaps also through its AI or through its API, I'm not sure. So privacy is kind of a big concern. And I think as librarians, we should be rather concerned with privacy. We have been historically. Next slide, please. So energy usage. Energy usage of these things isn't publicly known, but it's like not publicly disclosed by the corporations, but you can see announcements, including the rather mystifying one that I don't know if they've walked it back, but that Microsoft wants to reopen 3 Mile Island as an AI data power source, which is heavily symbolic of things if you're an old fart like me. But yeah, just a tremendous amount of energy usage, tremendous amount of environmental impact just based on running the electricity for these things. So rather intensely, there's an intense amount of power. Next, please. So control. So I've used ChatGPT maybe 3 times in my life. I haven't just to ping stuff off of, but my understanding, and people can please correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you are not using the API, you're just using a straight web interface, you can, of course, put the prompt in and do other things related around prompting it because it would be fairly pointless otherwise. But there are lots and lots of little things related to transformers-based large language models, of which almost every large language model is these days, around very esoteric settings like temperature and things called top K and top something else and Mirostat and all these little tiny things that you can twig in order to get different results and different activity out of your language model. Next, please. And cost. This is less of an issue now because the cost, for whatever reason, of doing inference on AI models on cloud AI models has come down tremendously over the past year to the point where the cost is really, really low. But there is still a cost. If you are building a service off their API, then you are paying X amount of dollars or cents per X amount of tokens coming in or out. And for some people like me, because I'm an enormously cheap bastard, having a cost associated with anything that I could do for nothing offends me greatly. Next, please. So why run a local model? Next. You have that privacy aspect again. On the models that I run on my home lab and at work, they are within my confines, they are within my purview, and they are very, I know exactly what they're doing. I can download them and run them, and I know what's going on with them, and I know that my chat transcripts, as innocuous as they are not being saved anywhere unless I choose to save them. Next, please. So energy usage, it's not immaterial, and I don't think I have a slide picturing this. But at my home machine where I run these things, I have a little meter hooked up to it for the USB plug that shows me how much wattage is being drawn. And when the machine is idling, or mostly idling, it's about 7 watts. And when the machine is doing active inference on a language model, it's about 30 watts. So it is a reasonable up in energy usage when it's doing inference. And if I log the machine and look at the load, I can see the load spike, I can see the memory usage spike. But at the same time, it's a lot less than probably certainly the aggregate of a ChatGPT response, it's probably easier on electricity. Next, please. And control. Again, I get the models. I know how to use them. I know all the little twiddly bits I can twiddle with them. For somebody who likes to twiddle twiddly bits, having that level of control over your model's usage is highly satisfying. Next, please. And cost. Okay, again, not as much of a factor as it was even a year ago or even 6 months ago. And I think indeed OpenAI announced a massive reduction in its O3 model token cost just today or yesterday. So less of a fact, but still it is, free and open source or free open weights distributed models carry a cost that's always going to be less than the cloud model. Next, please. And customizability. Again, touching on the stuff like the temperature stuff, touching on stuff like increasing the context length if you want to, or decreasing the context length. Oh, I don't know. I'm going to stop for a second. Increasing use of AI, I expect more power goods will go down this summer. I expect power goods will go down this summer for any number of reasons, probably most related to heat and age and other things. I don't know if you can directly attest to AI, but maybe. But then again, it's summer. There'll be fewer students in school, so perhaps fewer draw on things. And so I don't know. That's a real difficult question to ask because so many factors or answer because of so many factors running around. Next, please. So why not run a local model? Okay, so there's a cost associated with this, and that is a hardware cost. Now, the machine I have at home, I call a potato machine. It's not terrible. It's a little tiny box about the size of this, like literally, like the size of a drinks coaster, except quite a bit thicker. And it has 32 gigabytes of memory and an extremely weak onboard GPU. It does have an onboard GPU, but it's very small and rather memory constrained. But that still is something I had to go and buy or had to have, and so it's not immaterial. And if you want to get really good performant out of a local model, then that means buying NVIDIA cards, and those can run you, at least here in Canada, up of $2,500 for a 24 gigabyte card or something. They're really quite expensive, so that is a consideration. Next, please. Speed. All right. So when I was a kid, I had a TRS-80 color computer, which is a machine made by Radio Shack. This was in 1980 or 81 or so, and it didn't have a disk drive. It had a tape deck, like a little transistor, cassette tape. And I remember very distinctly putting a tape in, pressing play, saying load game, and then literally going outside to play in the yard, coming back an hour later to find my game had loaded or not loaded or whatever. And this kind of reminds me of working with local models. It's not quite that bad. I'm not really waiting around an hour, but they're not going to be, at least at the level that I'm dealing with, instantaneously responsive at a reasonable parameter count. If you're dealing with very, 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 very small models, they will be rather responsive, but they may be not so useful. Next, please. And on-prem issues. Whenever you bring a service that you've paid a vendor for and you want to run it yourself, even at a low scale, like something like futzing around with a large language model on your own desktop, there's still, you have to worry about keeping software up to date and security issues if you're exposing your web servers to the general public. So all those kinds of things that we as libraries have gotten used to outsourcing by paying vendors to deal with them sort of comes home if you're going to run something on-prem. Next, please. So that's it for me. I think it's Tim now, right?
Yeah,
Or is it
for
not?
sure.
Okay, good.
So thanks, John, for teeing up what's at stake and sort of the distinction, pardon me, between a web-hosted ephemeral thing where you just kind of click away and interact with something versus something running locally that you have more sort of access to and sort of knowledge of, right? So question is running locally. Oh, there we go. So how do we run a local workshop that will sort of engage the community interested in library stuff? Well, that's the first step, is getting that community together. And then for what we did was we kind of weren't ready to rely on the computers or the network connection that we had the room set up for, because you never know exactly what will happen in a conference setup, right? So we brought in actually hard copies or sneakernet copies, let's say, of material on USB sticks that we distributed to people in the workshop, right? And then we used a platform called GPT for All. There's lots of different ways that you can interact with a local LLM on your own computer, but this is the one we use because it's very graphical, and I'll show you some details about how that works. Right, so this is a screen capture of the first time we took this local workshop on the road, and we did it at a library tech conference last year. If there's any Canadians in the room, they'll know that this is a big deal because Access is the big show for Canadian tech for libraries, right? So we came up and we pitched a couple hours session. Here's the abstract. And then here is like literally the setup, right? So this is what we walked people through. We installed the platform, the client platform on their machine, and then we also gave them model files on USB sticks so that they can install in the same directory that those things worked from. And it was a real challenge sort of setting up this whole paradigm to make it meaningful to show the difference between certain models, but not to have them to be too powerful or require too much processing power, right? So we spent a lot of time working on this. And then the other thing here at the bottom, the last thing, is we created a RAG system, right? So we wanted to do some retrieval augmented generation just to sort of show off how that is affected, right? So this here is GPT for all. Just point out some big things. You see there's a button here for models that will actually sort of prompt you and really situate the idea that you're using different models when you're interacting with this platform. The local docs button, which I'll show in a little bit more detail, and then also the settings button. So that sort of paradigm that John was talking about shows up here. You can tweak all you want, right? So here's the two models in situ. But here's just an example of us working through some of our stuff in our workshop where we fired up the RAG retrieval augmented generation stuff. And then we asked everyone to type in some questions about, is Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse a good movie? And we had two sort of conflicting sets of data, right? So we had reviews that claimed it was a good movie and some reviews that claimed it was a bad movie. And then we just wanted to show and have everyone experience the difference between querying a model with those two sets of data. And it's great here. This is for when you use good Spider-Man reviews, and the result or the spit out from the LLM is great. The humans review of Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So the humans review, I thought that was interesting. And then you can see it says 3 sources, and then it sort of tells you where from the RAG material that the inferences were primarily sort of made from. And conversely, flipped over, here is the RAG setup for when we gave negative information about movie reviews, asked the same thing. And it's funny that the same LLM trained on the different material also says it seems that many humans. So, you know, at least it's not claiming it's one of us, I guess. And then the same deal with the inferences, right? So we've covered a lot of sort of different pieces here, but what I'll do is share the link that goes to our description of the workshop and encourage you all to remix it, reuse it, try it out yourself, or commission John and I to come by to your places and we can do some in-person stuff with it. And I think with that said, we'll get into some contact information if you're curious of getting in touch with us after this is done, or if not, happy to drive at any questions in the meantime. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you all. Just under 15 minutes, so less time for questions, but you made it under the 15 minutes. All right, so it is my pleasure now to introduce our final lightning talk presenter, Annalisa Sklar, if you want to share your slides. Thank you.
Okie doke. So many windows open. So my talk is somehow completely different, but also about using AI. And I wanted to share a little bit today about how I've actually been using AI on my LibGuides. And so backing up a little bit, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my approach to AI. I'm a big fan of Ethan Mollick, the Wharton professor and author of the One Useful Thing blog. And he divides work into 4 tasks when you're thinking about how to delegate to AI. So there are tasks that you can completely delegate. There are tasks that only a human should do. And then there are tasks that a human and AI can do together. And he uses the metaphors of centaur, where there's a clear delineation between human and AI, and then cyborg, where human and AI work together. I think you're going to see that a lot with AI integrated software. And then another point he makes that I think is really important to keep in mind is he recommends evaluating AI in comparison to the best human available. So in most cases, for tasks I need to do, the best human available is me. So can it do it at least as well as I can, but faster? Can it get me halfway? That really, AI can't do everything, but thinking about how it can do it compared to me and the time I have is really, really really key for me. The other sort of aha moment I had, UC San Diego also has our own tool called Triton GPT, and the face of Triton GPT is Tony Nava, who is also the Lean Six Sigma guy at UCSD. And so he often uses these three images as context for what AI, for how to use AI and how to think about AI and output. And so if you're starting with this raw input of clay, even if AI can just get you halfway there to this sort of that general shape with a single prompt or a set of prompts, the user, the human, me, can still refine that either manually or with additional prompts. And so it still saves you time if it's getting you a lot farther than you would get manually. So with that in mind, I started thinking, how can AI actually help me? What do I have that's boring or time-consuming work, writing where the originality doesn't matter, tasks where the information doesn't live just completely in my head, and tasks where I know enough about the output that I can check for accuracy, hallucinations, and so on. And so I started going through my to-do list. What can I offload? What fits the bill? But of course, LibGuides. Um, and so I've been thinking a lot about LibGuides. I've also just recently worked on a book chapter for a forthcoming book called Teaching Information Literacy in Political Science, Public Affairs and International Studies. And I had a few epiphanies as I was diving deep into the best practices literature. And so um, one of the things that people expect from a LibGuide, they expect that a guide will show them how to do something instead of just being a list of links. My guides are very heavily lists of links. Also, sort of a no-brainer but I had to actually realize this. Each tab is actually a web page as far as search engines and users are concerned. And so users may not come to your LibGuide from the front page. They may come in to a random tab. So they should understand what they're looking at that random tab. Editing a guide is actually two distinct functions, the selecting and organizing links, which is the fun part for me as a librarian, and then writing explanatory and contextual information, which is the not fun part. And finally, accessibility isn't just nice, it's the law in most cases. So how have I actually, with all of that floating around my head, how have I actually used AI to improve my guides? I use a lot of tools. I would totally fail at the first group's exercise because I jump between tools a lot. But I do like tools that have web access so that I can go back and check their work. I find I use Microsoft Copilot a lot for working with LibGuides, but I use Perplexity a lot as well. And I've been experimenting with different tools for making images. So, big question, can AI build a LibGuide? No, but it can do a good job with parts of your LibGuide. So you can get a good rough draft. You might get some parts that work, or you can get a pretty good outline. Then you could actually follow up with additional prompts to do a draft of each section of the outline. And then that's good for working on individual pieces of a LibGuide. It still can't copy and paste into LibApps. We're not agentic quite yet. So the big thing that I've been using LibGuides for is writing better link descriptions, because this is the thing I hate, and I wind up with like a pile of emails of, oh, I should add this link to my guide. So I've been, using very simple prompts like write a 3-sentence description of website with this URL. I love role prompting, act as an academic librarian and write a description for a LibGuide of the following, this data set or this database or this website. I've been expanding that to act as an academic librarian at a large public university or act as an academic librarian at our one university. So often I get pretty good descriptions, or at least enough that I can edit down pretty quickly and move on to the next. Similarly, I've been using AI to write page and section introductions. So realizing that my pages need to be more than just a list of links, I've really been trying to start adding context. And so In that same vein, I've been again using the academic role prompting, write a 2-sentence description of the World Bank, being more specific, act as an international government information librarian and write a description, or write a short introduction to a political science LibGuide and include the following points. I actually had one, I have a tab on my guides, it's called Reports, Documents, and Policy. And so I had it define reports, documents, and policy and explain why those are important as part of my introduction. So something else I've been doing, and I just sort of been experimenting, is vibe coding. I'm one of those people who can sort of grind through with code, and I can write bad code that will work, but I am not an elegant coder. And so one thing that I did to improve accessibility, I've had this this Google custom search box on my guides probably since the dawn of LibGuides, and it was an accessibility nightmare. And I ran it through, I think, Copilot. I lost the history, and asked it to clean up the code and make it accessible. And it did. And it made me this much nicer looking form as well. And now I have no accessibility issues on that LibGuide. I've also just started experimenting with interactive quizzes or web apps. So I read a post in the AI Law Librarian's Guide that about creating an interactive web app in 30 minutes. So I uploaded a set of my presentation slides into Gemini, and with a little bit, asking it to create a mini game and then turn the mini game into a web app, I got these interactive web apps that work. I will still refine them, but they work. And then maybe this one's kind of cheating because I really use image generation on the slides that I embed in my LibGuides, but I've really enjoyed being able to make my own copyright-free clip art images. So these are some of my favorites that I made with the Bing image generator when it first became widely available, featuring wildlife that is popular at the UC San Diego campus. And then I wanted to modify this graphic that was created by a colleague at Portland State. And so I wound up recreating it by hand, but I was like, oh, I'm also horribly not artistic. And so I ran it through ChatGPT and said, can you make this more like an infographic? And it came really close, but then I had a really hard time, kitties, then I had a hard time editing it with ChatGPT. And so then I started experimenting with Napkin, and I realized that Napkin could generate little icons for each word that I put in, and then I could paste them back into my original diagram. And so this was the final version that's now editable by a human with those Napkin images. So I'm pretty happy with that as somebody who never can create a nice infographic. And then the last thing that I do, and this is also kind of cheating because I use it more for reference, but these tools are often really great for hunting down a needle in a haystack. So I was using Microsoft Copilot for this a lot, and then Perplexity, and particularly for data sets. So, it's sort of amazing how well I'm looking for a data set that does blah, 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 and it will give me a link to something that is the data set or one click away from a data set that might have taken me hours to hunt down. And this is not a substitute for Googling and looking in databases, but it's a really nice additional way to hunt things down. And so, and then once I find new tools and new data sets, then I often then do add them to my LibGuides. So to summarize with some caveats, at this point, I do think AI can enhance human librarian work, but not replace it. Agentic AI will probably change this, but chatbots can't point and click yet. Lots of manual copying and pasting, cannot actually edit a LibGuide yet. I think people were really happy when it can. And I use AI to do work that I can verify or do myself, but the AI can do faster. And then again, just that final point, sometimes you get some really strange bloopers, even when the tool can search the internet. So always check your source. So I think that I am done.
All right, thank you, Annalisa. So we don't have much time for questions, but we do have a couple minutes. So the first question is for you. How, let's see, where did it go? Do you indicate in your LibGuides when you use AI to write content?
I haven't yet, and that's partly because a lot, again, it's factual information. And, I also don't indicate in my LibGuide when I've borrowed a database description from a vendor or something like that. So I think that it could get really, really hairy really fast. But I've thought about how we should credit that, but I think it could get really, really weird and confusing fast. So I haven't yet, but that's a really great question.
And another question just came in for you. Can you share a link to your web app quiz thing? If you're
I
willing.
can, and I should mention that I pulled together a handout of the prompts that some of the prompts that I've was able to go back and find, and it should be attached to this session as a PDF. And there should be also a link in there to the final version of the web apps. I couldn't share the prompts because I uploaded my own content to Gemini, and Gemini wouldn't let me share it. So.
And I see we have a couple for our second group of lightning talks. How does the power usage of AI compare to crypto mining?
Well, John, if yeah, feel free to jump in. I think you would have a better answer than I would on this one.
I don't really, other than they're both very, very, very power intensive. But I don't know how they compare. I would suspect that they're probably AI is probably more intensive just because there's a lot more people doing it. But I don't really, I don't have numbers for that. I'm sorry.
Okay. And then another question for the two of you. Are there any mini models that run well on typical laptops, perhaps ones that aren't general purpose but tailored to specific cases like code generation? Would you still recommend the same two models you used in your workshop?
I would say, and you can jump in, Tim. I would say that the two models we use in our workshop have been supplanted by more capable models. And is the case, I remember reading somewhere like every 6 months or so, you get to do about twice as much with half the parameter count. So that's quite logical. And what I would recommend these days, like when we were doing a workshop, we could not assume what equipment people are bringing in, right? We don't know what potato you're going to bring in. And so we tend to the very low parameter count. And I think on Tim's slide, there was Quen 2.5 at 0.6 or 0.5B. That's 500 million parameters. That's very, very small. And I would recommend probably now there's a Quen 3 at that level. And then I would go anywhere from Quen 3 at 0.5B, again, very small, to perhaps 8 billion parameter models. And I think that's a safe arrangement for laptops that are produced within the last 4 or 5 years. The crucial element at this level is not so much CPU speed and GPU, although that's important, as is memory. So in order to run an 8B model, I would suggest at least 12 gigabytes of memory, maybe a little bit more. For the 0.6, you could get away with 8, 4, perhaps. I don't know. Quite small. But yeah. So Tim, do you have a thing?
No, nothing to add. That was great.
Yeah.
Okay, I am not seeing other questions right now in the chat, and we're down to 1 minute left. So I want to go ahead and thank all of our presenters. I know it was hard to limit to 10 to 15 minutes, but thank you so much for your wonderful presentations. And feel free, if you do continue having questions, to continue in the Zoom lobby chat or in our Discord channel. So thank you everyone for attending, and I will close out the webinar now. Thank you, everyone.
So